Hi everybody, my name is Maddie and welcome back to my channel and another video. It's raining outside, I've got my cup of tea, and I figured we'd talk about some books. Okay, so May is not officially over when I'm filming this. I think today is the 28th. I should really know my birthday's coming up, should be counting down. But I thought I would film the May wrap-up video, so if I read any other books after this, well, I guess they're not going in the video. So I read, sorry, I have to pull up my Goodreads for this. I can keep track of what I had for breakfast yesterday, let alone what books I read this month. I read 6 books this month, which is a little less than I did the month before. Goodreads likes to keep reminding me my goal for this year is to read 50 books. I should just round it off to 52 because that's about a book a week. It keeps like reminding me that I'm behind. I think I'm almost caught up. I'm like 2 books behind where I'm supposed to be, so we'll make that the goal for June. But I'm happy with 6, that's like more than a book a week. So, the very first book that I read this month was The Astonishing Color of After. I really wish I had like the tangible books to show you. Everyone takes those like cute thumbnails where they're like stacking and like holding all the books. Because of like the whole pandemic going on, I've read most of the books on my shelf, and our libraries just reopened this week. So I've been reading a lot on my Kobo using like the e-libraries that we have. So I don't have the books to show you, which makes me sad because the covers are really pretty, but I will do my best to like superimpose them in the video. Anyways, back to what I was actually talking about. So the very first book that I read this month is called The Astonishing Color of After, and it's by Emily X.R. Pan. I'm going to apologize right now if I mispronounce anyone's names in this video. It's a YA novel, and it's about a young girl who is half white, half Taiwanese, and her mother commits suicide, and she starts seeing her mother appearing in her life as this like beautiful red bird. And she ends up going to Taiwan to visit her maternal grandparents who she's never met before, and it's a story all about like grief and hardship and loss and what it means to have to let go. It definitely makes use of like magical realism, which I love the way the author used it in this book. The way that it was used to like infuse memories and like pull her back to things that she didn't understand or she didn't want to remember, I think was really important. It also did like a beautiful job of showing how like in our grief we can tend to like run away from the things that make us happy because we feel like we shouldn't be happy because we've lost that person in her like relationship and friendship with her best friend. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. I can't recommend it more highly. I don't think there's enough YA books out there that deal with grief. We lost a close family friend when I was 10. My grandmother passed away when I was 17, and I think that like to be able to have a safe space where you can read about somebody who's like experiencing and understanding those emotions is incredibly important for youth, because I think for me, at least in my experience, so many of my friends didn't know what to do in that scenario because it wasn't something that they'd experienced. So I think this book was like a beautiful representation of how to deal with that. The book also does like a beautiful job at dealing with mental illness, mental health issues, and how that works particularly within a family dynamic. It does a lot to look at her relationship with her parents, how her and her parents interact with one another, and what it means to be the child of someone who has a mental illness, which I think is like really important to look into, especially for kids who have grown up with those experiences and maybe haven't had a way to articulate it. One of my other favorite things that this book does that I've noticed a lot more in YA literature, which I love, is an exploration of like art and education and how those come together. I think a lot of time as like young artists or writers or like creators, there's so much pressure to like go to university and get good grades and like get a real job or like put your efforts into something that's like going to matter in the long run. And I think this book is another one of those books, much like Radio Silence by Alice Osman, that really like navigates those murky waters and like really questions like why we have those beliefs and why we don't just let people do what they love, no matter like how scary or how uncertain it seems. So I gave that book 5 stars, highly recommend. I have a lot of 5-star books this month, so get ready for that. Okay, the second book on my list is a book that I've been meaning to read for a really long time, and actually I remembered it because a friend recommended it to me. So this is Tuesdays with Maureen by Mitch Albom. I have read Mitch Albom's books before. I've particularly read The 5 People That You Meet in Heaven, I believe it's called, and I love his writing style. I know a lot of people don't like it because it's like too sentimental. I saw a review of this book on Goodreads that gave it 1 star, and the person was like, it was like Hallmark card after Hallmark card. I'm like, did you read the back of the book? Like, what were you expecting? This is a nonfiction book that deals with Mitch Albom's relationship with one of his university professors. He reconnects with him after his university professor is diagnosed with ALS, or, oh my gosh, let's see if I can remember this, atrophic lateral sclerosis. Don't quote me on that. And it deals with like a lot of those questions about life and death and how we spend our time living our lives. I think it was like a really important book for me right now, and it really resonated with me. I've been trying to use a lot of this time in this quarantine to kind of like refocus myself on the things that I love to do, because I've noticed a lot in my life. Sorry for that, phone rang, I had to go and answer it. Where was I? Tuesdays with Maureen. This book really resonated with me right now where I am in my life, because I think I've been trying to use a lot of this time that I have in this quarantine to really rethink my own priorities, because I've realized a lot through my life I've given up the things that I love to do in favor of the things that I feel like I should be doing. And I think to like be reminded of why it's so important to have this, to spend the time that we have here doing what we love, I think is like a really beautiful message, because they talk about death and life and the way that in order to live you have to be okay with dying. So it's like, if something awful were to happen to you, are you happy with everything you've done up until this point? And I don't believe in the live every day like it's your last day. I think you're welcome to just have like crappy, awful days. But I do think it's really important to like look at how we're using the time in our life, because I think I've definitely fallen into ruts where I'm like, well, I'm not going to do my art, or I'm not going to work on my novel, because how is that going to get me anywhere? I need to put money and time into the things that are going to take me further. And I think I've really come to a place in my life where I realized that's not the life that I want to live. And I think this book was a beautiful reminder of that. This book also got me really emotional. We had a really close family friend who died of ALS when he was quite young. So I think it took me back to a lot of that place, and how hard it is to like watch somebody that you care about deal with a terminal illness. And I think it was a kind of a beautiful love letter to an awful illness, if that makes any sense, because it doesn't gloss over the worst parts of it, but it also doesn't romanticize or idealize it. And I think that's like really important, because a lot of the beliefs that Maureen is presenting are things that he's articulating to Mitch now, because he knows he only has so much time, but there's things that he believed and he practiced through his entire life, which I think is really important, because I think unfortunately a lot of times in literature, terminal illnesses get over-romanticized as this like, oh, beautiful, eye-opening, let me understand the whole meaning of life, and like, that's not always how they work, and I think that's also like a really unhealthy portrayal of such a tragic thing. So I feel like Mitch Albom did like a beautiful job navigating all of those intricacies in order to really pay homage to this man who meant so much to him. So I would highly recommend reading that book, especially as, like, if you're anyone who's ever been in the education system, I hope that you've had a teacher that's like really made you see the world. And this book is also a love letter to that relationship and the relationships that sometimes we don't always think about that had a lot of meaning in our lives. So those are my first 2 books, both 5 stars. Look at me go. I have more 5 stars. I just read a lot of good books this month. Don't judge me. Okay, the next book I have a lot of feelings about, so we're gonna get through it together. Next book is Sadie by Courtney Summers. I've been seeing this book everywhere. My mom was actually asking me if I've read it, and I was really nervous going into it because the story revolves around 2 sisters after one of them is murdered. Content warning. There is sexual assault, alcoholism, drug abuse. Pedophilia is a huge thing in the book, so if this is not going to be a healthy read for you, please look after yourself. Listen to the warnings. Don't read it. This book stuck with me. Like, I finished reading it, and it was one of those books that just, like, hits you. And you, like, can't leave it. Like, it's one of those books that I know the characters are going to stay with me forever, and, like, the message that it delivers is so important. Because there's so many children out there that just get, like, forgotten about. Particularly in Canada, there's missing and murdered Indigenous women is a huge thing. And as someone with Indigenous ancestry myself, this book just made me think about the way, like, that the book starts with this, like, I don't want there to be, like, another dead girl. And I think it's so easy to hear the statistics about missing children or missing murdered Indigenous women and just turn them into numbers and forget that there's something human. And that's what this book. Sadie's this brilliant character, and she's pulled between, like, being an adult and being a child and, like, wanting to fall in love and go to parties and experience all those, like, teenage things. But she's also been forced to grow up so young that she knows that those aren't experiences that she will ever get to have. And that really hit home with me because I think so often through trauma or unexpected circumstances, people are expected to grow up too young, and there's never, like, a moment to mourn all those things you wanted to have and all those things you wanted to experience. And this book gives Sadie that space to do that, to explore those emotions while she's going through this grief and her essentially revenge mission to avenge her sister's death. It's a beautiful story about an incredibly complex and intricate issue. To talk a little bit more about the specifics of the book itself, the book goes back and forth from Sadie's perspective and the perspective of, I can't remember his name, I believe his name is Wes, who is creating a podcast with her adopted grandmother trying to find her. So it's very interesting the way the story goes back and forth with that. I've heard the audiobook is amazing because they really play with the podcast element of it, and they have all those different voices and recordings and everything. I read it on paper, I guess, on an e-reader, but I've heard from people who've experienced it that way, that's a really beautiful way to experience the story too. So definitely 5 stars. Again, I loved this book, and I can't recommend it more greatly to everyone else. So those are the 3, like, standalones I read this month, and then I also read a trilogy. I'm not going to say too much about the trilogy because I've already filmed a video going more in depth about it, but it's the Truly Devious series by Maureen Johnson. So that consists of the books Truly Devious, The Vanishing Stare, and The Hand on the Wall. So these are, like, YA, I guess you'd classify it as, like, a murder mystery thriller. Stevie gets to go to this, like, elite boarding school, and basically anybody can get in for free. You just have to, like, submit a letter. There's, like, no generic, it's just a very generic application for students with, like, extreme passions, is the way I like to describe it. I don't like calling it a gifted school. I was in a gifted program, and I think the word gifted sounds so pretentious that it should just not exist anymore. So I'm just going to call it an elite boarding school for students with very niche interests and very passionate interests. So she gets to go because she writes a letter about how she's so involved in this, or so invested and interested in this cold case murder of the founder of the school, murder kidnapping, and she really meets friends there, and as she starts to unravel that mystery, a new mystery comes up on campus that kind of presents itself. I really enjoyed the first book of this series, not like a 5-star, but definitely like a 4-star read. The writing is pretty well done, and it's very easy to get into, and there was a lot of like really interesting characters that I loved. And then it really went downhill with the last 2 books, so if I had to give like this series overall to kind of like balance out the best and worst of it, I'd probably give it a 3 stars. It was enjoyable enough that I was able to finish the series, but I was really, really disappointed with the direction that it took at the last 2 books, and I felt like a lot of the beautiful things they set up in the first novel just kind of fell by the wayside. But I would still like recommend to check it out. It's not a bad read. The characters are really interesting. The books aren't like crazy long, so it's definitely a good way to like get back into thrillers and mysteries if that's what you love. And I do think the mysteries are quite interesting, particularly the Ellingham murder opposed to the more modern mystery that comes up. I think she invested a lot of time in that. I'm gonna leave it there. If you want more of my thoughts, like I go on a bit of a rant when I filmed this earlier today, so I will definitely leave that. Link below if I put it out before this. I might put it out after this, so if it's coming out after, keep your eye out for it. Anyways, so those are the books that I read. The standalones I read, I gave them all 5 stars. They were all amazing. I don't really have anything planned for June, so if you have any book recommendations, feel free to leave me a comment below. Otherwise, I'm gonna do some more digging, maybe finally read some of the 80,000 Stephen King books I own. I've probably already read 15 of them, but we're gonna try and one day read all those books that man has written. Yeah, so if you have any questions about any of the books, anything else you'd like to hear in my wrap-up videos in the future, please let me know. Leave a comment below, hit that subscribe button, and if you want to follow me elsewhere, I have a blog, which I'll link to in the description, and I'm also on Instagram at sleepcreatecaffeinate, where I post a lot of my art and also a lot of books and writing tips and everything, so feel free to check me out there below. Thanks, and have a great day, guys.